The Roman emperor who ran the world had a nightly ritual most people have never heard of. Not a bedtime prayer, not a glass of wine, not some ritual passed down by generals or priests. Every single night, whether he was camped on a battlefield in Germania, seated on the throne in Rome, or watching plague sweep through the streets of his empire, Marcus Aurelius did something so quietly powerful that it has been almost completely buried by history. He interrogated himself, and not gently, not politely, not in the way your therapist asks you how your week went. He sat in the dark, alone, and asked himself the most brutal, unsparing questions a man can ask. What did I do wrong today? Where did I let fear win? Where did I betray my own values? And here's the part that'll stop you cold. He wrote the answers down, not for anyone else to read, not for posterity, not for publication. For himself, only for himself. What you're about to learn isn't some motivational hack. It isn't a 5-step morning routine or a productivity trick repackaged from a Silicon Valley billionaire. This is the actual psychological technology used by the most powerful man in the ancient world. A man who commanded 30 legions, governed 60 million people, survived plague, betrayal, and war, and still managed to die as one of the most respected human beings who ever lived. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand why what happens in the last 10 minutes before you sleep might be the single most important 10 minutes of your entire day. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you lay down to sleep and your brain absolutely refused to shut up? You're exhausted. You've been moving since 6 a.m. You've handled 10 problems, answered 50 messages, made 100 micro decisions. Your body is done. But your mind? Your mind wants to replay that conversation from Tuesday. It wants to catastrophize tomorrow's meeting. It wants to remind you of the thing you said in 2017 that you still haven't forgiven yourself for. Sound familiar? Here's what's actually happening. And it's important that you understand this at a biological level. Because once you understand it, the 3 a.m. rule will make complete sense. Your brain has a mechanism called the default mode network. When you stop actively focusing on a task, when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, your default mode network kicks on like a generator. And it doesn't idle quietly. It surges. It starts connecting dots, replaying memories, running simulations, scanning for threats. This is why your worst thoughts visit you at night. The modern world makes this problem dramatically worse. You've been bombarding your brain all day with dopamine hits, notifications, headlines, short videos, arguments in comment sections. Your nervous system has been in a state of low-grade emergency for 16 hours straight. And now you want it to simply stop? It won't. It can't. Not without help. Most people handle this one of 3 ways. The first way, they reach for the phone, scroll until they pass out. The brain gets its dopamine drip and eventually gives up. But this isn't sleep. It's sedation. You wake up still tired, still heavy, still carrying everything you never processed. The second way, they drink. They take a sleep aid. They find some external chemical lever to pull. Same result. Sedation masquerading as rest. The third way, they lie there suffering, staring at the ceiling, running the same anxious loops until 2 a.m., until exhaustion finally wins. And none of these people, not the scrollers, not the drinkers, not the ceiling starers, wake up feeling clean. Because here's what they all have in common. They never actually processed the day. They consumed it. They survived it. They endured it. but they never closed it. And Marcus Aurelius, a man who dealt with problems that would break most of us before noon, figured out how to close every day before he slept. That's what we're about to unpack. Before we get to the practice itself, you need to understand the philosophical foundation underneath it. Because if you skip this part, the practice will feel like a chore. Marcus Aurelius was a Stoic, but not in the way the internet uses that word. Not emotionless, not cold, not a man who suppressed everything and felt nothing. The real Stoic philosophy is something far more radical. It says this: you cannot control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. And the work of a human life, the only real work, is to get better at that response. That's it. That's the whole thing. Every situation that lands on your doorstep, the betrayal, the failure, the loss, the humiliation, is not the problem. The problem is the untrained, reactive, automatic response you bring to it. And here is where Marcus Aurelius diverged from how most people think about self-improvement, even today. Most people believe that transformation happens through addition. Read more books, learn more skills, add more habits, stack more disciplines. Marcus believed transformation happened through subtraction. Find what is false, remove it. Find what is reactive, examine it. Find what is cowardly, name it. He wrote in the Meditations, and I want you to feel the weight of these words. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He wasn't speaking to a crowd. He wasn't writing for you or for me. He was writing to himself, reminding himself. Because even the emperor of Rome, even the man with all the power, had to fight for his mind every single day. That is the context in which the nightly practice was born. It wasn't a ritual born from discipline. It was a ritual born from urgency. Marcus knew that if he did not deliberately close his day, did not deliberately examine, sort, and release what had happened, it would fester. The resentment would calcify. The fear would compound. The regrets would metastasize. He wasn't doing this because it felt good. He was doing this because the alternative, an unexamined mind, was, to him, the greatest threat a man could face. Greater than war, greater than plague, greater than assassination. An unexamined mind, running on automatic, guided by unquestioned assumptions and unprocessed emotions, would destroy him from the inside out. And he was right. Now we get to the heart of it. The practice I'm about to describe is drawn directly from the Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's private journals, combined with what historians and Stoic scholars have reconstructed about his nightly habits. I've also pressure tested this myself, personally, for over a year. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it, what it does to your brain, and why it works at a neurological level. Let's call it the 3 a.m. rule. Not because you do it at 3 a.m., but because it prepares your mind for the deepest possible rest. The kind that used to only visit people who had truly laid something down before they slept. The practice has 3 movements. Movement 1, the tribunal. The first thing Marcus Aurelius did before sleep was not to relax. It was to judge. Not himself exactly. Not in a self-punishing, shame spiral way. He judged his actions. There is a critical difference. Shame says, I am bad. The Stoic tribunal says, that action was not aligned with who I am trying to become. Here's how you do it. You take 10 minutes, no phone, no noise, no light except what you need to write. And you answer 3 questions. Question 1. Where did I fail to meet my own standard today? Not where did life fail you? Not where did other people disappoint you? Where did you fall short of who you say you are? Be specific. Be merciless. Be fair. Maybe you snapped at someone you love. Maybe you avoided a difficult conversation you knew you needed to have. Maybe you scrolled for 45 minutes when you said you wouldn't. Maybe you were dishonest, not to someone else, but to yourself. Write it. 1 or 2 lines. You're not writing a confession. You're filing a report. Question 2. Where did I act in alignment with my values today? This is not self-congratulation. This is calibration. Marcus Aurelius understood something that modern psychology has confirmed. If you only ever audit your failures, you train your brain into a threat detection loop. You stop being able to see what's working. You become a person who is only ever catching themselves doing wrong. And paradoxically, that person behaves worse, not better, because they've lost their North Star. Find one, just one moment from the day where you showed up as the person you want to be, where you were patient when impatience was easy, where you did the hard thing when the easy thing was right there. Anchor it, name it, write it. Question 3. What will I do differently tomorrow? Not a 5-step plan, not a resolution. One specific, actionable, tiny correction. If you snapped at your partner, the correction is, tomorrow I will pause for 3 seconds before I respond when I feel irritation rising. If you avoided the conversation, the correction is, tomorrow I will send the message by noon. One thing, small, real. This is how Marcus kept his standards from becoming a burden that crushed him. He wasn't trying to become perfect overnight. He was making a single micro-correction every night for decades. Compound that over 30 years, you get one of the greatest human beings in recorded history. Movement 2, the release. Here's where most people fall apart. Even the people who do some version of journaling, they audit, they examine, they write, and then they close the journal and lie down, and the mind keeps going. Why? Because examination isn't the same as release. You can identify a wound all day long. Naming it doesn't heal it. You have to set it down. This is where Marcus Aurelius was drawing on a specifically Stoic technology, what the ancient philosophers called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of adversity. But in the nighttime context, he was using a related practice, the deliberate act of returning the day to the cosmos. Here's how to do this in practice. After you've written your tribunal, after you've named your failures and your anchors and your one correction, you do something that will feel strange at first. You close your journal and you say, out loud or in your mind, something like this: today is complete. What was done is done. What was broken can only be addressed tomorrow. I release this day. That's it. That's the whole thing. But do not underestimate what is happening neurologically when you do this. Your brain is always listening to the language you use. When you say, today is complete, you're not performing a ritual. You're issuing a command to your default mode network. You are telling it, this loop is closed. There is nothing left to process here. Stand down. Research from cognitive behavioral therapy confirms that this kind of deliberate cognitive closure, the intentional symbolic ending of a mental loop, measurably reduces nighttime rumination, accelerates sleep onset, and improves sleep quality. Marcus Aurelius didn't have fMRI machines or sleep labs, but he figured out the same thing 2,000 years ago, sitting in a tent on the Danube frontier, because the wisdom was always the same. It was always about learning to let go with intention. Not because the day didn't matter, but because tomorrow can only be handled by a rested mind. Movement 3, the preparation. The final movement of the 3 a.m. rule is the one most people never think to include. After the tribunal, after the release. Marcus would turn his mind toward tomorrow, but not to plan it, not to strategize or schedule or prepare. He would steel himself for it. In the Meditations, he wrote a passage that I think is one of the most psychologically sophisticated things any human being has ever put on paper. He wrote, and I'm paraphrasing here closely, that when he woke in the morning, he would remind himself, "Today I will meet ingratitude, arrogance, deceit, and cruelty. But I will not be surprised. I will not be wounded. Because these people are not evil. They are simply ignorant of what is good. And my task is not to be them. My task is to remain myself." Read that again? He was doing this at night. Not in the morning as a panicked, last-minute reminder. At night, in advance. He was preloading the morning mind with a framework for absorbing adversity without flinching. This is what the third movement is. Before you sleep, ask yourself, what is likely to challenge me tomorrow? Not to fear it, not to dread it, to anticipate it, to greet it like an old opponent you already know. Maybe tomorrow you have a hard conversation. Maybe you have a high-pressure presentation. Maybe you know that a certain person in your life is going to push your buttons in a certain way. Name it, write it down, and then write this: I will not be surprised. I am ready. This is psychological inoculation. When you rehearse adversity, when you imagine the difficult thing in advance and practice meeting it with steadiness, you drain it of its power to hijack you. The thing that blindsides you is always the thing that breaks you. The thing you've anticipated, you've already survived it in your mind before it ever arrives in reality. Marcus Aurelius survived everything the ancient world could throw at him: plague, war, betrayal, the death of children, the ingratitude of the empire. And he did it not because he was unfeeling, but because he had prepared his mind every single night to meet what morning would bring. I want to be very direct with you here, because this is the part that took me the longest to believe. When you do this practice, not once, not for a week, but consistently over months, something happens that I can only describe as a rewiring. Not a metaphorical rewiring, a literal one. The brain is neuroplastic. This is not a self-help slogan. It is hard neuroscience. The patterns you practice, the neural pathways you fire repeatedly, grow stronger and more automatic over time. Most people spend their entire lives firing the same reactive pathways. They get triggered and they snap. They feel fear and they freeze. They encounter failure and they spiral. They do this so consistently for so many years that the pathway becomes a superhighway. 16 lanes wide, frictionless, automatic. The 3 a.m. rule interrupts that. Every night that you sit down and audit your reactions, every night that you say, "There, that was the reactive choice. That was the fear-driven choice. That was not who I am." You weaken the old pathway. And every night that you name a moment of alignment, every night that you say, "There, that was the intentional choice. That was the values-driven choice. That was who I am becoming," you strengthen the new one. Over weeks, you start to notice something subtle. In the middle of a difficult moment, in real time while it's happening, you catch yourself. Not after, not in hindsight, during. You feel the old reaction rising. You feel the snap or the freeze or the spiral beginning. and something in you, something quieter and steadier than the reaction, observes it and pauses. That pause is everything. That pause is what separates the person who has lived by their circumstances from the person who lives deliberately in spite of them. Marcus Aurelius called this the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty, the part of the mind that observes without being consumed, the inner witness. He believed this was the truest part of a human being, not the emotions, not the reactions, not the fear or the rage or the grief. Those he acknowledged fully. But underneath all of it, there was something steady, something unshakable. And the nightly practice was how he kept that steadiness clear and strong, like a blade, sharpened every night. After 6 months of this practice, I stopped needing as much external validation. After a year, I stopped being afraid of difficult conversations. Not because I became numb, not because I stopped caring, because I had spent 12 months building a relationship with a version of myself who could handle hard things. I'd rehearsed it. I'd examined it. I'd corrected it. I'd released it. Over and over. And somewhere in that repetition, the version of me I was building became the version I actually was. That's the promise of this practice. Not overnight, not in a week, but it is a promise you can take to the bank. Let me anticipate what you're already thinking. I don't have time for this. I'm too tired at the end of the day. I've tried journaling before and it never sticks. Fair, all fair. Here's what I'll tell you. Marcus Aurelius managed an empire that stretched from Scotland to Syria. He fought active wars on multiple fronts simultaneously. He lost children. He watched his best general betray him. He managed a government rife with corruption, incompetence, and sycophancy. And he found 10 minutes, not because 10 minutes fell from the sky, because he made 10 minutes. Because he understood that the 10 minutes he gave to this practice would multiply across every other minute of his day. The man who spends 10 minutes sharpening the blade spends far less time forcing the dull edge through wood. But let me give you something even more practical. Start with 2 minutes, not 10. 2. Just the first question. Where did I fall short today? One answer, one sentence. Then close the book. That's it. That's day 1. Add the second question in week 2. Add the release ritual in week 3. Add the preparation in week 4. Build it slowly. Build it the way Marcus built his character. Not with a dramatic single act of will, but with 1,000 small, consistent acts, accumulated over time until the structure is so solid that nothing can knock it down. Another obstacle. My day isn't interesting enough to review. This one reveals a misunderstanding of what the practice is for. You're not reviewing a highlight reel. You're not looking for drama. You're looking for the moment, the quiet, almost invisible moment, where you had a choice and either honored your values or betrayed them. Those moments are everywhere. They're in every conversation, every silence, every decision about how to spend the next hour. The person who says their day has nothing worth examining is the person whose days are running on autopilot so completely that they can't even see the choices anymore. That person needs this practice the most. Let me bring this home. Marcus Aurelius ruled Rome for 19 years. He was the most powerful individual on earth for nearly 2 decades. He commanded armies, shaped law, decided the fates of millions. And when he died, in 180 AD, his contemporaries said something remarkable. They said he seemed at peace, not the peace of a man who had been lucky or sheltered, or who had avoided the weight of the world. The peace of a man who had faced every hard thing the world had offered him, and had processed it, examined it, released it, and prepared for the next thing. Every night, without exception. The meditations are not a book of philosophy. They are a record of this practice. They are Marcus Aurelius talking to himself in the dark, asking the hard questions, making the micro-corrections, closing the day, preparing for morning. You're holding in your hands, or rather, watching on your screen, a 2,000-year-old technology for mastering the human mind. And it costs you nothing. No app subscription, no retreat, no guru. 10 minutes, a notebook, and the courage to look honestly at who you were today so you can become more of who you are trying to be tomorrow. That's the 3 a.m. rule. That's the secret Marcus Aurelius left us. Not in a speech, not in a decree. In the private pages of a journal he never intended for the world to see. But the world found it anyway. And now you have it. The question is what you'll do with it. If this hit you the way I think it did, if something in you recognized this, I want you to do one thing before you close this video. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is the one thing you're going to examine tonight? Not a perfect answer, not a polished reflection. One honest sentence about one thing from today. Because the community watching this video is full of people who are serious about this work, who are done with surface-level self-improvement and are ready to go deeper. And when you put your honest answer in that comment box, you're not just journaling for yourself. You're signaling to your own brain that this is real, that you're committed, that tonight you're going to close the day like the emperor. If you're new here, hit subscribe. This channel is built for exactly the person who watched this video to the end. We go deep. We don't sugarcoat. We don't do motivational noise. We do the work that actually changes the architecture of who you are. And if you want to go deeper on Marcus Aurelius, if you want the full framework of Stoic mental training, the complete system he used for building what I call the inner citadel, I'll leave the link to that video right here. Watch it, apply it, come back and tell me what shifted. Until then, do the practice tonight. Close the day, and wake up as someone who chose it.